shot all at once into a state of violent activity. There was abundance of conversation, and little fear of its ever flagging, for the good humour of the glorious old twins drew everybody out, and Tim Linkinwater's sister went off into a long and circumstantial account of Tim Linkinwater's infancy. Immediately after the very first glass of champagne, taking care to premise that she was very much Tim's junior, and had only become acquainted with the facts from their being preserved and handed down in the family. This history concluded, brother Ned related how that exactly 35 years ago Tim Linkinwater was suspected to have received a love letter, and how that vague information had been brought to the counting house of his having been seen walking down Cheapside with an uncommonly handsome spinster, at which there was a roar of laughter, and Tim Linkinwater, being charged with blushing and called upon to explain, denied that this accusation was true, and further, that there would have been any harm in it if it had been, which last position occasioned the superannuated bank clerk to laugh tremendously, and to declare that it was the very best thing he had ever heard in his life, and that Tim Linkinwater might say a great many things before he said anything which could beat that. There was one little ceremony peculiar to the day, both the matter and manner of which made a very strong impression upon Nicholas. The cloth having been removed and the decanters sent round for the first time, a profound silence succeeded, and in the cheerful faces of the brothers there appeared an expression not of absolute melancholy, but of quiet thoughtfulness, very unusual at a festive table. As Nicholas, struck by this sudden altercation, was wondering what it could portend, the brothers rose together, and the one at the top of the table, leaning forward towards the other, and speaking in a low voice as if he were addressing him individually, said, "Brother Charles, my dear fellow, there is another association connected with this day, which must never be forgotten, and never can be forgotten by you and me. This day, which brought into the world a most faithful and excellent and exemplary fellow, took from it the kindest and very best of parents, the very best of parents to us both. I wish that she could have seen us in our prosperity and shared it, and had the happiness of knowing how dearly we loved her in it, as we did when we were two poor boys, but that was not to be. My dear brother, the memory of our mother." Good Lord, thought Nicholas, and there are scores of people of their own station knowing all this, and 20,000 times more, who wouldn't ask these men to dinner because they eat with their knives and never went to school. But there was no time to moralise, for the joviality again became very brisk, and the decanter of port being nearly out, brother Ned pulled the bell, which was instantly answered by the apoplectic butler. "David," said brother Ned. "Sir," replied the butler. "A magnum of the double diamond, David, to drink the health of Mr. Linkinwater." Instantly, by a feat of dexterity which was the admiration of all the company, and had been annually for some years past, the apoplectic butler, bringing his left hand from behind the small of his back, produced the bottle with the corkscrew already inserted, uncorked it at a jerk, and placed the magnum and the cork before his master with the dignity of conscious cleverness. "Ha!" said brother Ned, first examining the cork, and afterwards filling his glass, while the old butler looked complacently and amiably on, as if it were all his own property, but the company were quite welcome to make free with it. "This looks well, David." "It ought to, sir," replied David. "You'd be troubled to find such a glass of wine as is our double diamond, and that Mr. Linkinwater knows very well. That was laid down when Mr. Linkinwater first come, that wine was, gentlemen." "Nay, David, nay." "I wrote the entry in the cellar book myself, sir, if you please," said David, in the tone of a man quite confident in the strength of his facts. "Mr. Linkinwater had only been here 20 years, sir, when that pipe of double diamond was laid down." "David is quite right, brother Charles," said Ned. "Are the people here, David?" "Outside the door, sir," replied the butler. "Show 'em in, David, show 'em in." At this bidding, the older butler placed before his master a small tray of clean glasses, and opening the door, admitted the jolly porters and warehousemen whom Nicholas had seen below. They were 4 in all, and as they came in, bowing and grinning and blushing, the housekeeper and cook and housemaid brought up the rear. 7, said brother Ned, filling a corresponding number of glasses with the double diamond. And David, 8. There. Now you're all of you to drink the health of your best friend Mr. Timothy Linkinwater, and wish him health and long life and many happy returns of this day, both for his own sake and that of your old masters, who consider him an inestimable treasure. Tim Linkinwater, sir, your health. Devil take you, Tim Linkinwater, sir. God bless you. With this singular contradiction of terms, brother Ned gave Tim Linkinwater a slap on the back which made him look, for the moment, almost as apoplectic as the butler, and tossed off the contents of his glass in a twinkling. The toast was scarcely drunk with all honour to Tim Linkinwater, when the sturdiest and jolliest subordinate elbowed himself a little in advance of his fellows, and exhibiting a very hot and flushed countenance, pulled a single lock of grey hair in the middle of his forehead as a respectful salute to the company, and delivered himself as follows, rubbing the palms of his hands very hard on a blue cotton handkerchief as he did so. "We're allowed to take a liberty once a year, gentlemen, and if you please, we'll take it now, there being no time like the present, and no 2 birds in the hand worth 1 in the bush, as is well known, leastways in a contrary sense, which the meaning is the same." A pause. The butler unconvinced. "What we mean to say is, that there never was," looking at the butler, "such," looking at the cook, "noble, excellent," looking everywhere and seeing nobody, "free, generous spirited masters as them as has treated us so handsome this day, and here's thanking of 'em for all their goodness, as is so constancy a diffusing of itself over everywhere, and wishing they may live long and die happy." When the foregoing speech was over, and it might have been much more elegant and much less to the purpose, the whole body of subordinates under command of the apoplectic butler gave 3 soft cheers, which, to that gentleman's great indignation, were not very regular, inasmuch as the women persisted in giving an immense number of little shrill hurrahs among themselves, in utter disregard of the time. This done, they withdrew. Shortly afterwards, Tim Linkinwater's sister withdrew. In reasonable time after that, the sitting was broken up for tea and coffee, and a round game of cards. At 10:30, late hours for the square, there appeared a little tray of sandwiches and a bowl of bishop, which bishop, coming on the top of the double diamond, and other excitements, had such an effect upon Tim Linkinwater that he drew Nicholas aside and gave him to understand confidentially that it was quite true about the uncommonly handsome spinster, and that she was to the full as good looking as she had been described, more so indeed, but that she was in too much of a hurry to change her condition, and consequently, while Tim was courting her and thinking of changing his, got married to somebody else. "After all, I dare say it was my fault," said Tim. "I'll show you a print I have got upstairs one of these days. It cost me 25 shillings. I bought it as soon as we were cool to each other. Don't mention it, but it's the most extraordinary accidental likeness you ever saw. Her very portrait, sir." By this time it was past 11 o'clock, and Tim Linkinwater's sister declaring that she ought to have been home a full hour ago, a coach was procured, into which she was handed with great ceremony by brother Ned, while brother Charles imparted the fullest directions to the coachman, and besides paying the man a shilling over and above his fare, in order that he might take the utmost care of the lady, all but choked him with a glass of spirits of uncommon strength, and then nearly knocked all the breath out of his body in his energetic endeavours to knock it in again. At length the coach rumbled off, and Tim Linkinwater's sister being now fairly on her way home, Nicholas and Tim Linkinwater's friend took their leaves together, and left old Tim and the worthy brothers to their repose.